If you've followed me around for some time now, I'm sure you've noticed that I'm a fan of Danganronpa, especially if you've seen my earlier videos where I had a song from V3 and it was way too fucking loud. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the series, I thought I'd talk about the adaptation of Trigger Happy Havoc. When I came across the series, I remember practically everyone I met in the community trying to tell me that the anime butchered its adaptation. I first got into the series because of the anime, and a short time after I watched it, I got the game because I was curious to see how true the claims that people threw at the anime really were. You can see how true they were by the title of this video. Straight out of the gate, I have to say that this video won't be that long because there's realistically only 3 differences between the game and the adaptation. The first one is something that you notice right away, but it doesn't really impact the adaptation at all. There are scenes that were changed to better fit the anime format, as these particular scenes cause a lot of redundant dialogue if left in their original state, because it tells you things that you've experienced firsthand. When areas unlock, Makoto and the rest of the cast explore their surroundings and find out what's new. You get to personally talk to the other students to see what they found out, and when you're done, they all meet up and discuss those things. The reason for this in the game is quite simple, as you're Makoto and are just participating in sharing newfound information to the group. But in the anime, it takes on a different perspective. Within the adaptation, you're simply a viewer that doesn't have any precedence over Makoto. The information that you learn in the anime, however, is the exact same as it is within the game. It's just presented in a different way to support the change of medium, since you can't go about the anime the same way you would the game. In a similar vein, let me talk about the most notable difference between the game and adaptation: the handling of the investigations. Throughout the series, there are 6 investigations, 1 for each chapter of the story. One of the reasons people try to say that this anime is a bad adaptation is because of how these investigations are shown within it. The anime cuts out a lot of the exposition and shows you the important clues and details to the case, and I've seen people say that because of that, they skip a lot of key information for the trials, which is just blatantly false. While the investigations are sped through because of the length of the anime, they're not glossed over in the slightest. Like the previous thing I've mentioned, the information that Makoto learns throughout the investigation is presented within the trial phase, and because of that, they only show it within that phase to avoid the redundancy of repeating something you just found out. The way that they're handled in the anime is honestly fine as it is. It doesn't really hurt anything about the story as it presents everything that's needed. In the game, this redundancy doesn't exist because the investigation phase takes a relatively long period of time to complete, depending on a couple of factors, such as how fast you can read, and if you choose to teleport to places of interest or walk to them instead. In the anime, you're not the one solving the mystery behind each of the chapters, and because of that, the investigation phases are not long. You're only a spectator that's supposed to see the cast draw their conclusions on their own. It's why the anime doesn't show you every little detail that happens within those segments. You're unable to fully draw your own conclusions because it purposely wants that. It ties into the big reveal that happens in the latter half of the series. It's the biggest difference between the versions, but it doesn't really hurt it as an adaptation as the community would want you to believe. This next thing is something that has always confused me with how people treat it as something inherently important to the story: free time. Free time is a segment in the game that happens before the investigations take place. It's a completely optional part of the game, as you can just outright skip it, but if you choose to participate in it, you get to know the characters. The anime takes the route where Makoto just skips free time. People complain about this, but it's a fault of the game more than its adaptation. If you skip free time, the cast doesn't really feel all that fleshed out, as most of the characters' stories are locked behind the event. I can understand some people being upset about the anime not including these things, but I find it really dumb to fret over it when it's not a mandatory part of the game to begin with. The story of this game was very well adapted to the degree that I can't really say a whole lot other than what I already have, so I'm gonna talk about a few minor things before I wrap this up. The times where the anime goes over a period of a few days where nothing happens is a part of the game, but the only difference with it is that those parts are specifically where the free time events take place. Other than that, there's very little variation between the versions, so it always puzzles me how I've seen people say, for years, that the anime was a terrible adaptation. The studio behind this anime put a lot of care into it, especially by how they tried to recreate the visual effect of the trial's gameplay when that honestly shouldn't have worked in the first place. When I was new to the game, I thought they reused the game's punishment rounds in the anime at first glance, but I was surprised to see that they nearly identically recreated them. Honestly, Danganronpa's anime is something that I say works perfectly as both an adaptation to the series, as well as an advertisement to go out and buy the game. It fully adapts the story of Trigger Happy Havoc, but it doesn't include the optional parts, so you'll still have something new to discover when you play through it yourself, such as the bonus mode and how you play through the trials. The only thing that's truly left out of its adaptation is the Monokuma Theater segments that you get throughout the game. They're not too important, but they're there in the game to give you clues for the story, as well as give you some time to get to know the mastermind. All in all though, people in the West just don't seem to give Danganronpa's anime the credit that it deserves, and I really think people should start acknowledging it. It's not perfect, but neither is the Danganronpa series. I might be biased towards the anime since it was my first look into the series, but I'm really glad that I watched it all those years ago. Going into it, I never thought I'd end up loving it the way I do. After playing the games, it quickly became my favorite game series, and I'm really glad I discovered it when I did. I hope the rest of the fanbase is having just as great of a time as I've been. It's the 10th anniversary for Danganronpa, and you only get one of those. Do whatever you can to celebrate it in your own special way, even if all you do is reminisce about your introduction to the series.